Good morning, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt Doolittle for the, why do I say it? Francis Zhou, Zhou, Martin, Stepan, and Curt Doolittle for the Natural Law Institute. Today is our, I don't know if we're doing it weekly again, bi-weekly, whatever. I'm not in charge of that.
It's after New Year's. We did our encore during makeup during the December timeframe, during December holidays, so we're back to bi-weekly.
All right. So bi-weekly Q&A session where you guys submit questions, usually pretty good ones, honestly, and we answer them. Usually Francis reads the question, Martin does his usual take on it, which is usually correct. I try to add depth and color. All right, so I guess we got how many today? We got quite a few, and I guess, Martin, what did you say?
I accidentally skipped 5 questions that should have been answered last time, so they're first now.
To the front? Okay. All right. So the first one, are we going to kick this off?
Yeah.
I don't have any goddamn. I don't have any coffee.
Oh well.
You know, I found my pants. I found my shirt. Managed to brush my hair and stuff, but I don't have coffee. It's not right. I know. Francis says, "Shut the hell up, Doolittle. You're always you're addicted to your caffeines and things."
Well, you know, tea is a lot easier to make than proper coffee.
It's true. I do have tea here.
All right. So, question 1 from Suki. What are Japan's sequence of institutions?
I've moved to the view that everyone's first institution was religion, though of course religions substantially differ across populations and those differences then inform further development. The admittedly my admittedly limited understanding of Japan shows the army might be next, but obviously not in the modern sense of the word. Now that I think of it, I think maybe the difference between state and law is actually a difference between centralized and decentralized army.
Okay, so I'll add to a bit here because I did look into Japanese history, or rather, I was fascinated by Japan for a period and looked into this history. So, from what I understand of Japanese history and geography, it lacked a river system on a contiguous landmass to solidify central state formation. And up until the Sengoku period, and that's our warring period, circa, I want to say 1600 or something, don't ask me about dates. Japan exists as a loose collection of isolated villages, towns, and feudal estates. It never developed an organized religion like the Jews, but rather maintained pagan animistic religious belief to this day. This is what they call Shintoism, and when you visit Japan, you often see these shrines and so on. The vast majority are actually Shinto shrines, and for some weird odd reason, they worship things like fox spirits and have statue chisel to honor the fox spirits. In fact, it may be the only developed country unconquered by Abrahamic religions. I count China as being conquered by an Abrahamic religion, allied communism. So I think that leaves law as its first institution, which may explain why the Japanese adopted Western governing institutions so well during the Meiji Restoration, though I'm not familiar enough with the traditional rule of law in Japanese society prior to state formation. Curt?
Well done. Yeah, so just for the audience, the questions relation to our work on path dependency in institutional formation and civilizational differences in the sequence of institutional formation. Turns out the sequence that you develop your core institutions is profoundly impactful on your future. And that's largely become the capacity to adapt certain institutions is higher than the capacity to adapt others. So law is highly adaptable and religion is highly resistant to adaptation. So what you tend to see is the more law-oriented, the faster a group evolves, and the more religious, the slower it evolves and may not evolve at all, it may stagnate. There's a relationship between the military and the state. And so you tend to get military strength that wants to preserve itself and turns into states. So you have the military state axis, the law axis, and the religion axis. The question is, what's the difference between an institution or not? And Francis just explained that really. There's something called natural religion, which is basically animism. That's the natural religion that all humans develop. And it looks like it develops from interment, burials. Not positive, but it looks like most religion develops from that. And just as institutional religion evolved from the initiatic, imitating the initiatic brotherhood of soldiers. Soldiers have to risk a great deal on themselves. So usually you get a formal religion after a group has some military capacity. I don't mean military like state military. It's just, some group of warriors.
Collective sovereignty.
Correct. They develop collective sovereignty. Thank you. So in Japan's sequence, which is the order of formation of an institution is a thing that develops a governing or ruling or managerial class that uses the means of persuasion of the institution and seeks to intergenerationally persist it. In other words, they're trying to maintain I don't want to call it a bureaucracy, but an administrative group that persists it across generations. So the difference between a natural religion, which is just evolves organically, due to basically the collection of and recitation of myth and rituals, versus an institutional religion which develops essentially a professional class that makes its living from running that organization, brings new people in, and persists intergenerationally. So that's the difference between a natural order and an institutional order. Anyway, so Japan's sequence is really that they had military success, right? They were good at it. They developed state success, and they developed law success. They actually found religion essentially unnecessary because they were not. I don't know why I say this kindly. Um, they have a separate island that doesn't need to bring in people who are of different factions. Remember the reason you need organized religion. You need it because people who come in contact with one another need a means, a system of measurement, which provides them the capacity to cooperate despite their differences. Japan is a very homogeneous place. It's fucking wonderful. I mean, if you can live in that world, you are lucky. It's similar to the Nordics until they started immigration. And so that's your optimum social structure. So the military is a first mover. They made the sovereignty decided by force. The state is basically the result of organized military, right? They made right. The state needs to be able to administer, so it developed law, and there were attempts to bring Buddhism in for government governing purposes because it's submissive religion. Um, I
It's a
don't
religion for
know.
lower classes. Again, it's a religion for lower classes, except it's not a subversive religion for the lower
That's
classes,
right.
right? And the
Right.
ruling aristocracy were still in charge.
Correct. That's exactly correct. So I already covered the velocity of adaptation. This is why Europeans and Japanese are, I mean, Germans or Japanese in particular, are so well suited to each other. It's because they went through the same, um, uh, basically feudal period. They went through essentially a loose
Mm-hmm.
federation, and then they became a state. And so both countries had questionable people nearby. For Germans, it was the French, and the East, which they didn't consider the Slavs originally. It was more like the Huns. Um, so you got this evolutionary velocity out of both Japan and Greater Germania, which was very beneficial for everyone. So I hope, Suki, that answers your question. That's it's actually a great one. Once you understand the path dependencies of institutions and the rates of evolutionary adaptation they provide, you understand why some civilizations are relatively backward and some of them are not, and why some of them adapt very easily and some of them resist it.
Yeah, I just have a couple of points to add. I guess if law is that civilization's founding institution, then it makes it easier for them to adapt to the law of nature because it's culturally have the respect for these rules.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's smart. Yeah, they're not resistant to the law of nature at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite smart. Yes.
Whereas if you came from a society where it's ruled by law, i.e., like in case of China, the state uses law to rule its people, then it developed over the generations. The Chinese developed a natural aversion and trying to poke holes in that
Mm.
and
Yeah.
less
So,
respect
so,
for the law.
so if you develop law that is basically natural, right, close to natural, you're going to have less adaptation and less resistance to law
Mm-hmm.
that comes out. Whereas if you are trying to go against what we would consider natural law, adherence to the behavior of the universe, so to speak, then your people develop a resistance to law. And then if they develop a resistance to it, they develop a resistance to the state
And,
generally in turn.
and I wonder if that's what caused the difference, what led to the difference between guilt-based societies versus shame-based societies.
Which two? What based?
Guilt-based versus shame-based society. For example, Japan, Germany, and most Western countries, or at least according to Roger anyway, are guilt-based societies, i.e., people have an internal governing mechanism
Hmm.
that holds themselves responsible for doing the right thing. Versus in
Hmm.
shame-based societies, if you don't get fined, that the only shame is getting fined out for the
Hmm.
bad things you did, and not people don't carry their internal guilt.
That's correct. So you see this playing out as the spectrum of high trust to low trust
Mm-hmm.
society.
Oh, I guess just one more point to add before we move on to the question. So the Japanese feudal estates that you mentioned, where they persist their how do you put it? Persist their governing institution.
Hmm.
Yeah. So they're they're literally called daimyo, the big names. From back in the days when your common villager doesn't even have a last name, these
Hmm.
daimyos have developed intergeneration governing and administrative institution for their local domain.
Yep.
And they're
Smart.
the samurai aristocracy and so on.
Basically, you don't want to get big and centralized early. You want to. I'm gonna feed Martin a softball here. You want to preserve subsidiarity as long as possible. Um, and so organizations that are not able to centralize too much, and that tends to favor Japan and Europe versus, let's say, the Middle East, in particular. China, somewhat, although China's not as good a comparison as it is to the Middle East or India. But if um, you get centralization too easily, like Egypt or the Tigris and Euphrates, what you get is there's just so much control from the central authority because it's so easy to rule that you can get stagnation rather than law. Whereas the reason you get law is because you're trying to unify people who are somewhat separate from each other, right? You're trying to make it so they can cooperate at larger scale. And so laws, it's a better way of doing things if you can make it happen. Now, I mean law in the sense that we mean it, which is law that corresponds to the rules of the universe rather than command. There's reciprocity law versus command law. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they're the anyway. I think I've made my point. I don't need to bury it any farther.
I was just,
Yeah, of
I
course,
just,
it goes.
go ahead, Mark.
Well, the other side of the coin is if you're unable to centralize sufficiently at all, then you can't compete at scale.
Great. That's right.
But in that case, I mean, we see a spectrum, right? Germany and Japan, until their times of unification, exist as, I think in German they're called Hansas, i.e. city-states, a couple of thousands of them. In Japan, it's a daimyo, it's a local lord, and so on. And they both unified until much later because their geography and the technological development at the time did not afford them to unify, did not give affordance for these states to unify
Right.
anyone. And then
Right.
on the other extreme end of the scale, you get Egypt and Mesopotamia, where it's all flat land, river valley, very easy to control, held by central power, and so on. And then China is somewhere in the middle. So China also have river plains and large swaths of plain area, river deltas, which is conducive to state control. But there are also pockets where it's very difficult for centralized power to invade, i.e., like a valley off in the mountains and somewhere. The Chinese geography is very, very diverse. And so that's why you see in China, there are histories of unification by strong central power. Then that power, the dynasty decays, and the quote country breaks apart into many small parts competing for each other. Eventually, one of them gets strong enough and unify everybody again. And then going back to Japan, I think the Japanese probably realize this, but they're the worst. Well, I guess that depends on how you define worse. If you define worse as war and people dying, then that's certainly under the Bakufu. That was certainly not the under the Bakufu shogunate. That's certainly not the worst. But after their Sengoku period, during their period of unification, where all the entire country was unified under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan also suffered 300 years of lagging the West. Because remember, during the Sengoku period, in terms of military technology, they took muskets that the Portuguese traders, learning this technology, they basically perfected it. It was far better due to their metallurgy and craftsmanship. They created far better muskets as well as tactics than the Europeans at the time. And then after the shogunate united the country, they said, well, real man fights with swords. So they got rid of all the muskets. And then that led to, in the middle of 1800s, Commodore Perry showed up in Tokyo Bay with, they call them black ships, right, because they look black, with a few Navy vessels with cannons that the Japanese samurai can't, they don't have anything to counter. They were forced to open their country. But they did a 180, to their credit, they did a 180 and said, well, this is clearly the way to go. We're going to start a revolution, and we're going to modernize the country, and in another 50 years or so, they beat a European power.
Yep. It was awesome.
Yeah,
Well, I can see an argument for why you'd limit it internally to swords. But obviously, when you fight with outsiders, you need the best technology available.
Yeah, yes, except the problem is they were isolated from the outsiders, so they just end up fighting swords because they're the else they need to fight. All right, I think we did that one justice.
We did that one justice.
All right, question 2. How does an NLI framework address the claim that we are all one, all of the universe, acting out the universe?
It's imprecise. We are all one what? Yes, we are all part of the universe, but what implication does that have? If the claim is there's no differentiation, that is obviously untrue. It's that there is no hard separation, sure, but it's hard enough for us to function as separate.
Yeah, of course, Martin's right. I'm trying to figure out what this person's trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're trying to solve something that's some question, and I can't figure out what that question
He's
is.
trying to figure out how to argue with hippies.
With what?
With hippies.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Well, if you, here's how I frame that belief, right? Is that at an interpersonal level, we probably can almost all get along, and we should work toward that model, right? Well, that's true, but we're going to end up with natural law of reciprocity if we work at that level, right? The problem is that it's always this, is that while you would say that, it's always a sacrifice to someone and always a benefit to someone else to do that. So, there's actually a window of possible cooperation. And that window is you're sophisticated enough and you're not too far beyond us, that cooperation is mutually beneficial. instead of risky or unbeneficial from some other means. And so the way you do that is you try to get most populations into marginal indifference, or what I won't say equality, because that's not possible, but I would say marginal indifference. And the way we know how to do that is exactly what our organization recommends by saying, let 1,000 nations bloom. What we mean by that is that groups need internal manners, ethics, morals, traditions, and institutions and economies, etc., that suit their demographic distribution and suit their degree of development. Yet, and then if you have different countries instead of empires or whatever, what you get is the capacity to ameliorate differences through trade that you cannot ameliorate within the same polity because of your political differences in the degree of your development and the degree of your demographic distribution of talents, so to speak. Basically meaning IQ. So the problem is creating that window. In the sense that Martin's arguing against it, it's true. We're all part of the universe. We all evolved here, but that's the same. That would say we're like the same as cockroaches, lobsters, and I don't think of something else, Martin. Cockroaches, monsters, and I don't know, badgers or something. The fact that we all evolved out of the universe doesn't tell us anything about each other. The fact that if we reach a point of relative indifference in development, we still can't overcome relative differences in IQ and impulsivity, domestication syndrome. Or we can, it just takes eugenic reproduction for about 6 generations. Unless we do that, you're going to always have differences between groups. So the groups need internal orders that are specific or specifically useful for the talent distribution or the ability distribution of the population and its level of cultural development. And we all need to trade with each other so that we can compensate for the results of those differences. So it's not it's not actually rocket science. It's just hard to bring about. Although I got to tell you that we've done more to create that in the past 150 years than we've done in all of human history. I mean, the Romans tried hard, the Chinese tried hard, the Indians, they're always fucking weird, but they actually tried hard. It was interesting. I think the people that failed are the Middle East. They're the ones that fail at pretty much everything.
No hippie is going to understand that.
Yeah, I know. Well, we have to have.
If any hippie understands it, they'll be enlightened hippies and they'll join us.
As usual, I think you're once again forgetting to ask why shouldn't I kill you and take your stuff.
Well, that is the whole point. I guess that's inferred by, look, you're either within this window of possible cooperation, or I'm better off killing you and taking your shit.
It's not just that cooperation is possible. Being similar doesn't help. We are competing for the same niche.
Yes, that's true. Well, what it's a normal human, especially feminine. It's a cognitively feminine desire, especially among the poor and people. And the hippies are really the result of being one generation out of poverty, right?
And of CIA meddling.
Say again?
And of CIA meddling.
Okay. I have to go with you on that. That's your area of expertise, not mine. So they're one generation out, and so they have they've retained their Christian peasant or Christian underclass effeminacy, right? Is submission, so they don't have to create hostiles in a world where we're actually involved in continuation of the world wars to end empires and convert to nation states. But anyway, like I said, Martin's
that's an impossibility. You're just creating a bigger empire.
Yeah, I know you believe this. I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I would say that if the empire is basically enforcing natural law, that's a good thing, and that's fine.
Not when it's undermining local sovereignty.
Well, I agree with you. Let it.
Okay. Before you guys go down this road again,
Well, it's a good road. I mean, we got to solve it eventually. I mean, it's hard to make Martin say I'm right. You know, it takes a long time.
that's because you stroke his ego too much.
What?
You stroke his ego too much.
Oh,
Okay, I'm gonna add a bit to this. Just say to answer the question: the universe has but one command: evolve, and it does so via negativa, via entropy. As such, the law
yes.
governing the universe rewards those who adapt and conduct the fastest evolutionary computation. We indeed all belong to the universe, but we compute EC in diverse ways, which covers the greatest computational surface.
That's brilliant. Wow. Nicely said. Nicely said. Very clear, very reduced. All right.
Okay, next. From Suki, thoughts on the prediction that Black Africa will follow the Chinese sequence of institutional development? Why does the arrow point the other way? State and then left
Yeah,
arrow, law
I don't
and
know.
religion given their conditions.
Oh, it's means mean dominance, right? So state is the highest dominance, law is the
Okay.
next highest dominance. He didn't mean it as developmental direction. He meant it as dominance. Okay.
I have
This is the
doubts.
stuff that makes Martin crazy. This is stuff that makes Martin crazy. Stuff that uses symbols and they can be interpreted two ways.
And it uses them inconsistently, and that's,
All right.
I have doubt. There just isn't sufficient pressure. In the past, they had some kingdoms here and there, but nothing that has left a mark on history. Today, it's largely artificial post-colonial states living off of Western aid. Going from that into a civilization would be unprecedented.
Hmm. I think it's not universally true, but it's probably directionally true. We do see some attempt right now, especially West Africa. Well, I mean, West Africa is the place you want to talk about because they're the so so you do see state formation, and my view is that borders are a hindrance to state formation. You know, the colonial borders are a fucking nightmare in this area, and because some of those borders make a difference in available resources, nobody wants to surrender them. So I would say, yeah, I would say African religion is natural religion. It's basically superstition. However, if you go to where the church has been effective, it has in fact been effective. And it has been effective in creating the capacity to produce a state. So I'm not sure about that. I think if we were to say religion is not being formalized sufficiently, but it is creating the precursor needs of a state. I think the state law religion is probably true. So I would think I would agree with this. Martin's argument is probably it's really hard to hold pressure. It's really hard to do it in the absence of in the presence of unnatural borders. But when I look at Africa, I see good things happening. And the weird thing is that for all our talk and all our funding and all our politics and all our religion, it's fucking cell phone, smartphones, because they have access to information outside of their world, right? And they can see what they can have. So whereas through most of history, we had to generate pressure, as Martin talks about, to make these things happen. The population is generating pressure for these things to happen, and so I'm not sure, I'm not sure they're, that I'm not sure Martin's wrong, but I'm not sure pressure doesn't exist. I think pressure is just, who's the guy that's, is it Nigeria? Who's the guy that's trying to pull together these African states in the middle in there? What's his name? He's fucking
Sounds like
amazing,
maybe,
man.
yeah, sounds like Nigeria, right? Nigeria wasn't Nigeria the only country, one of the few anyways, in Africa that's actually have some resemblance of a modern state.
Yes. But you have some. He's trying to put. God, I wish I could remember his name. I can see his face in my mind. Um, he's trying to put together basically a federation of
Mm-hmm.
states in that part of Africa. And Africa's weird. They got the coastal area, right, which is basically Arabized. What do they call themselves? They don't like to be called Berbers. They have another name for
Oh, you mean
themselves.
like the
Right?
the north, the southern coast of Mediterranean?
Yeah, no, yes, exactly. The North Africans, right?
Mm-hmm.
We call them Berbers, but they actually don't like it. They have a name for themselves, which I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not good at re-getting my nouns all the time. Um, but once you cross the desert, right, you get down to this band, right? That we mostly throw into West Africa, but it's called the what Sahel? I want to say Saheli. That's not it. The
Sub-Saharan,
Sahel.
sub-Saharan.
No, that's everything, but it's this group of places that are just below the the desert,
Mm-hmm.
and they have some people and some resources and some green, and he's trying to put that together, you know, and so I see that as very promising, because maybe he won't succeed, but maybe somebody else will because he's got the right idea and he's creating the right cultural stuff for it. But honestly, I swear to God, it's really ridiculous. It's the presence of information in that part of the world that's generating demand is fascinating. I think you have this one woman that follows me, and I'm pretty tight with. She's from that part of Nigeria. She lives in the States now, but she's an engineer. And I love talking to her because she has such deep insight into the area. And so it's not, and they are quite the Ghana Nigeria group. That's pretty evolved people down there. Um, so I suspect they can put it together. When you get down into other parts of Africa, right? I mean, we're talking about really unpleasant territory to build, because there's like this anyway. African geology, right? The distribution of Africa is fucking nightmare because that the fucking because of the solar rotation cycles and the American the Earth's climate cycles. What happens is the climate moves this way up and down Africa, and it's sort of like an evolutionary brutality machine.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have the desert that was once wet and now it's desert, right? Then you have the place where it's tolerable, but there's no rivers, right? And then you go down south and it's fucking mountains and rock and it's horrible. And then you get out to the bottom where you're near the coast and it's okay again. And I mean, geologically, it's a hard place to build civilizations in. And one of the benefits, I know people, I know the, God, I get so much pressure not to talk about it, but it's just true, is that we got the first real advanced humans out of that process. But the problem is there's no, unless the population was crushed, which it had been, the overall human population was crushed as it was 75,000 or 100 whatever thousand years ago, 300,000 years ago. Unless you get these crushes, there's no ability to isolate and speciate like there was during the expansion out of Africa. So when we left Africa, we got to go into all these different climes in isolated groups. And so we speciated, subspeciated, whatever you want to call it. We created genetic groups we call races that responded to different areas of the world, but it was much harder there. We did get the old Africans, which are the Khoisan And we have the new Africans, which are like, I guess the Bantu is the category that of tribe that is the majority. And so we did get the old Africans and the new Africans, but it's actually pretty hard to get isolation and speciation in Africa, and in part because it's warm. You think, well, that's good, isn't it? No, it's not good. It means you don't need to do things like live together in close proximity indoors so many months of the year. So you have to survive the pressure of domestication syndrome. So so Africa has its challenges, right? I mean, it's got challenges, but I don't believe they can't do it. I believe it's like Martin said, there may be insufficient pressure, and I think that in the pressure that they're going to continue to see is awareness of what they can have like the rest of the world if they choose. I don't know if Martin is right. I'm overly optimistic about things, and I prefer to retain my optimism over their potential possibility.
Just,
I don't see
just
why.
for a point of clarification, insufficient pressure for what?
And have Martin answer that. He's better at that than I am.
To develop civilization
Okay.
via any institutional path.
So the problem is this: is that in order for we do it naturally in most most of the civilized civilizations, most of the other civilizations, and that is, what are you willing to not take advantage of for your own benefit in order to preserve the benefit for the common good? Like, I love the story of Africa because I've done this myself in in Japan, where if you lose your wallet, somebody might just bring it to you.
Or at
Right?
least they give it to
Now,
the Koban, the police, and then you can go to the police
right.
station where you lost, close to where you lost your wallet. And chances are it's going to be there with
Well, it'd be
every
there,
single penny
right?
still in it.
In it. Yes. So I remember when I was at Disney World and I found a wallet, and I'm so fucking good Christian boy, good Catholic boy, naive. I pick up the wallet and I say, hey, did you lose your wallet? And of course, what happened is some guy said, yeah. And I only realized afterward that it probably wasn't his. Um, so, if you're raised in a high trust society, I mean, Japan's a high trust society, right? If you're raised in a high trust society, where you are willing to forego opportunity, then you will get people who build civilization. But the problem is, if people are so borderline that every incremental is an advantage to them, and they feel no indebtedness to their peers, they won't civilize. And that's what Martin is essentially alluding to.
Well, the
Is
reason anyone has ever civilized is for warfare.
Yes, correct. It's usually through warfare because you have to. I mean, it's the only. If you have to produce a collective trust, in other words, not take advantage of each other in order to be able to produce a military that actually stand its ground. The West is notorious for this, is that they don't run. Whereas if you put together a formation, they won't run. And so whereas most less developed people, the problem is they run. And then they take an individual benefit over collective good, which makes them victims. Martin's correct. And so if you can't produce a military, which is one of the things he's arguing, right, that is high trust, you can't produce a population that's high trust.
I think that's very important. If you cannot
I would
produce a
say
military that's high trust, then you cannot produce a population that's high trust.
Correct. And so the whole problem I've said is that people are trying to bring about democracy before they've brought about the foundations for it. The first foundation is a high trust military. From the military, you should be able to produce a system of law. From a system of law, you should be able to produce a government. If you produce a government, then you can start to have civilization. But that's the optimum path. The problem is not everybody, evolution wasn't equally kind to every civilization. in its path dependency.
Yeah, and if you start a democracy, then you immediately end up with oligarchy that will loot all of your civilization.
Absolutely. Yep, you're right. Absolutely.
Well, tying to the last question or answer to the last question, I think some of the African tribes should be left the way they are because they even cover evolution and computation niche.
Yep.
If
I
and
mean,
when if and when modern civilization falls apart, we're probably going to need those people to carry on the chains.
that's right. That's right. I always look at the pygmies and I'm like, yeah, I have 50 IQ, right? But they do just fine,
Mm-hmm.
just fine together, right? They have shorter lives, right? They much shorter lives, have all the consequences of it. But if you see videos of them, they're fucking happy and they're being dumb, right? I mean, what do they live in a bow and arrow world?
The gods must be crazy 1 and 2. That's their story, right? That movie.
I don't know that those. I haven't watched those. I
You
don't know
haven't
what
watched
they're
them?
about.
No, you should.
No.
They're fun. Even my daughters enjoy them.
Well, of
All right,
course,
what's next?
they can do that because at that level they're not competing for our niche. So they're not threatening us any more than animals.
That's probably right.
Yep.
Yeah, other than the occasional poacher, nobody goes into their territory.
Bantus are hunting them sometimes. Sometimes Bantus hunt them.
Oh, yeah. All right, shall we move on?
Yeah, except
Question
I don't
4.
sure understand this question.
Oh, question 4. From Suki, the Indian concept of karma is said to be understood as intentional action or volition caused by an agent, with the effect to be inevitably experienced by that agent, and can either be good or bad, with the duration being of various timescales, days, weeks, years, and lives. When the scope is applied reflexively, this is just cause and effect. If I study better, I'll get better grades. From a social system theoretic perspective, actions can be modeled as outputs of an agent system. The environment as a network through which effects propagate, and feedback loops as a mechanism by which consequences eventually influence the agent. Can karma be understood this way, be formally analyzed as a dynamic system of inputs, outputs, and delayed feedback? Yes or no, and why? Is karma a concept that would withstand scrutiny from analytic principles, or would it break?
Many Western philosophers have remarked on the superiority of Indian metaphysics in comparison to Abrahamism. The thing is, all of that stuff survives in the oldest texts, and the Indian nation doesn't seem to have done much with them. In fact, I just found out for a long time they couldn't even read them until Europeans translated Sanskrit. And sure, you can interpret karma that way. Most people, however, interpret it as some sort of cosmic justice, or as Bryan called it, revenge for lazy people.
I have to get my coffee, guys. Give 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't actually read any of those texts, so I can be wrong.
He might try to lick you to death. Hey, Hiya, come on. Hiya, come on. Thank you. Take care. Thanks, boss. Me knowing this dog and seeing somebody afraid of it is hysterical.
It's Lassie! It's modern day Lassie.
And his tail was broken at some point, so he can't even like beat you with his tail.
What? Oh,
His tail was broken at some point,
that
so he
sounds
can't
terrible.
even beat you with his tail. I'm not leaving this down where you can get at it because I know you. Yeah, I can't trust you.
Yeah, I had a junkyard dog ate my burrito at one point.
Say that again, bro.
A junkyard dog once ate my burrito.
Did he really?
Yes. Unfortunately, it's probably very bad for him because of all the salt and stuff.
Oh yeah.
All
All
right,
right, let's go.
move on.
Where are we looking for?
The question about karma.
Yeah. Did you read it already? Yes.
Yeah, I did, and Martin gave his answer.
Okay. So there's two basic ways to look, two claims inside karma. One is operational, which is the one that's stated here, and one is metaphysical, that there's a cosmic moral ledger, basically equivalent to you have an internal soul, and I guess the god or gods can see that, right? So that's its actual meaning, is those two parts. So let me think about this for a second. So what is the question more accurately? He models outputs of an agent, says that's correct. Yes. Yeah, I mean, the way to look at it is that you could take karma and keep the services of it, which is the discipline, the ritual, the norms, and remove supernaturalism out of it, and it's just fine, right? It's actually a good way of doing it. Or you can keep the supernatural in it, either in the Hindustani method or in the Abrahamic method, or even in the European method, which is, the gods will judge you, right? And I don't know about in China. Is there equivalent of, there must be an equivalent of being judged, is
Yeah,
there?
I'm trying to think back. I don't think Taoism have anything like that, but Buddhism for sure. But Buddhism is also an Indian religion, right? So
Yeah,
the reincarnation, being judged, and so on. Taoism essentially kind of deduce down to if you find the Tao, if you work hard enough, then you can become gods. So it's a
yes.
very active
Hmm.
agentic kind of religion.
Yep.
I don't think it's a European tradition. That's Plato's introduction. It's more traditionally in Egypt, where you'd be judged by Osiris.
So I think that sophisticated question, but and which means it's a little harder for me to disassemble exactly what you're asking. But can karma be understood this way? Can it be formally analyzed the dynamic system inputs out in delayed feedback? It's the delayed feedback that is key. But yes, absolutely, it actually can be. Um, I don't know what to do with these questions, but often. But yes, that's correct. You're correct. I mean, you only have so many ways to regulate people and cause them self-regulation. And so, you're basically saying, what bargain can I produce? Right? That's what you're trying to produce.
What
All right.
bargain can you produce? But what do you mean by bargain?
Religions are there to create a submission response so that you are willing to pay the cost of foregone opportunity in order to preserve that which is sacred, which is usually some set of commons. So there's only so many ways of getting people to do that, and And so I like Stoicism, of course. I like the Greek way because partly because I'm European, but partly because it's the least supernatural, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Chinese way because it's again the very not at all supernatural, or not. There's a hint of it in there, but that's more of a
More
that's
well, especially if you're talking about Taoism, is more mysticism than
it's more
supernatural.
mythical than supernaturalism, exactly. Um, um, Hinduism, it's closer to a trade, and of course in Abrahamism, it's declared to be a trade, right? And um, it's really you're using basic human. You have a limited way of human coercion, and there's a very narrow band of human submission. Because what you're really doing with religion is you're provoking a submission to the pack response, right? That's what you're doing. That's where what that instinct is. And so what you try to do is create something where you submit to the pack. We generally do this through an exchange, right, which is how humans do things. Um, and that exchange might be very European, which is if I do this, you'll do that for me, or very Jewish. If I do this, you'll do that for me, and maybe I can get away with it. um, uh, because that's what in God means in Western European. It means to pour. Well, we have this thing called bell beaker culture. Why do you think we have these funnel beaker, bell beaker cultures? Because that's how you pay homage to the gods: is you sacrifice, you pour. Right? So
Wait, God
God
means to
literally
pour?
God means to pour.
From
Right? It
what
means I'm
language?
pouring. Proto-Indo-European, Indo-European. It's Indo-European. It's
Oh, it's a
Proto-Indo-European.
Pi language?
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
Pi language. To pour, right? So I mean, that's the European side of. I don't know what happened when it gets into the Caucasus and
Mm-hmm.
over into India, but that's in the etymology of the word God. It means to pour, and it means to pour because the introgression of the steppe people into the West brought in the mixture of the steppe culture and the conquered agrarian cultures or the hunter-gatherer cultures, and that's where we get these vessels. So these vessels are part of basically everything, which is you just give the gods a drink. That's your small sacrifice. So sacrificial cultures are essentially a trade. They're right. That's what they're trading. They could call it a bribe. You could call it trade. And so sacrifice is really you're really working with basic human intuitions that are largely precognitive. So I mean, we only understand these late in our own existence. So basically, religions are structures for creating a universal system of measurement by provoking a submission to the pack response by provoking a debt response. That debt response can be created in multiple ways: fear, um, uh, bribery, or trade. Right? I mean, which is the three versions of human coercion. So I mean, it's mechanically it's very simple, really, what's going on. We just feel it very intensely, and it's provoking basically, very low level stuff in our brains. So that's what's going on.
And what's descriptive and what's useful for manipulating people are two separate questions. And Suki was asking about the first one.
Give me that again.
That Suki was asking if it's descriptive rather than useful for manipulating people.
Well, what is it useful for manipulating versus what?
Descriptive.
Descriptive. Okay. Um, Well, the descriptive answer, yeah, I mean, I think I just described it. I'm not sure. I can't really cross into whatever he's trying to get at here. But so that's how it works. The problem is we tend to look at our position of our knowledge and look back at history and think we're better. But the answer is it took a lot of knowledge to get to where we are today. And so they were working with very simple tools. In the absence of anything, the cheapness of religion it's a profoundly cheap way of creating organization between peoples. So that's what they did. I mean, it's essentially fraud, but I mean, as stated, it's fraud. As a consequence, it's not.
It works.
It works.
It achieved this purpose.
It's superior to what we are doing in the West now, which is disorganizing people.
Yes, exactly.
Them.
All right, ready to move on?
So one thing. When I started, I saw the problem. But what I think is happening is that the problem is now obvious. Hey, get your nose out of that's mine. And I think that because you're in your generation, I'm in mine, I was still working from my frame and you're working from the frame you're in. And it took me a while I'm just slow. It took me a while to get there. All right, what's next?
Okay, next question from AJ. It seems like Curt's America, NETS, would not be able to vote. I don't know what that means. Should
But
they?
not in education, employment, or I forgot.
Okay, well, you can explain that later. Should they bother voting in Curt America, or should they try to get a job or something before worrying about that?
Not in education, employment, or training. Basically, stay home and play video games.
Okay.
I appreciate the confidence people have in our reforms being enacted in the foreseeable future. Of course, ideally, there shouldn't even be voting unless the sovereign wants to ask for the opinion of his subjects. All it does is give people the impression that they have a power that they don't actually have, which pacifies them against the regime, provokes hostility against their family and friends, and gives the government reasons for propagandizing the people. We should do away with such pretenses and malincentives. As for you, that depends on what you want out of life. Don't make plans based on unpredictable changes other than in making ourselves less fragile.
Okay, so let me reread the question. Will you stop?
Sorry.
It's a dog.
Not you, the dog. It's driving me nuts. He wants. It's just a pain in the ass. All right, I love him, but he's a pain in the ass. All right, so would not be able to vote. Should they? I don't really think. I don't want to isolate them. My argument would be is that the voting pool should consist of those people who've done. If we're going to have voting, and I'm going to argue with Martin that this is really the question. If you have a population, some of whom are engaged in contribution to the polity, and I basically means that by responsibility for more than themselves. Right. That was the original intent of voting in the Anglo model, and it's been the downfall under universal enfranchisement. The universal enfranchisement was created so that we could basically use Napoleonic conscription to bring people into the war instead of just recruiting them for pay. That was possible partly because we prohibited soldiers from looting. And so in the absence of looting, we had to find further incentive. Well, we couldn't find a further incentive. We had to produce conscription. We also had to produce conscription because war became much more deadly under industrialization. So that's the pathway for expanding the franchise. The pathway for women was basically Christian guilt coming out of the New England, which is my people, which I will never forgive them for. Giving women the vote was partly so that we could tax them, right? And so we wanted the tax revenue, right? But women were basically, what?
I've heard there was at least one state where women were given the vote so they'd outvote Catholics.
Yes.
Because only men were coming.
Yes. So there's a bunch of games going on here which are not central to the actual purpose of democratic participation, which is to provide an equilibrium between the people who are responsible for production, distribution, trade, defense, everything else in the economy, and the people who are administrating that in what we call the government. That was the original plan. That usually works pretty well. And you get to universal enfranchisement, that it's the problem. Martin and I have written about this in the constitutional reforms. I won't go into it here, but we've covered this actual issue. So in my world, if you're not in my world, in my understanding, if you are going to have a check on the administrative capacity of the state, you would only have the people responsible to it. Otherwise, the state will buy authority by grants to the people who are not responsible in order to obtain their power. So you either have an equilibrium between the responsible people and the administration, or you have a disequilibrium between the people who are administration and the people who can be bought against the people who are responsible. And that's what happens, is you always have them ally against the responsibles, which of course is suicidal. So I don't want to address NEETs. I think that's the same issue. If they're not contributing and then they're not bearing responsibility, like if you're not bearing responsibility for yourself, that's worse. If you're not bearing responsibility for the polity, that means you shouldn't have vote. But if you're bearing responsibility for the polity, I think the very least you have to check on it. What I think in the past, it was more of, I had to ask these guys to raise money, right? To raise money. I didn't have to ask their approval for like being in office. So there's a couple of different ways you can play this. The whole point I'm saying is that you need to create an equilibrium of forces. You can't count on people's good nature or people's intentions or people maintaining benevolent incentives or whatever. You can't count on that. And that is, in my understanding, the utility of democratic voting is people who demonstrate responsibility for the commons provide an equilibrium check on the people who actually administer and produce the commons. That's my understanding. So I don't believe in universal enfranchisement. I think you have to earn it, and I think you should be able to lose it if you demonstrate that you should lose it. And I do that because I have less confidence than Martin does in the benevolence of any administration. Monarchies, quite opposite of our propaganda, monarchies are pretty good at this because they're essentially families whose revenues are dependent upon governing. The monarchies generally had to get support of the nobility. The nobility was the people essentially that held the actual means of production, which was agrarianism. So under monarchies, under rule of law monarchies, with subsidiary rule, in other words, nobilities over different regions, I think that works just fine. If you're not going to have a monarchy and you're not going to have nobility, then you're going to have the administrative state, but you're going to have some sort of elected officials or some appointed officials, and you're going to have some body of people who are equally responsible to prevent the state from going sideways, because they all do always. So And I think the real problem is extending the franchise beyond responsibility. And in that sense, I agree with Martin.
If you want to make people have more influence, then ensure they have capacity for organized violence.
I didn't get it, Martin.
If people want to be heard, they have to have capacity for organized violence, because that is how you actually vote.
It's another way of subsidiarity. It's another one of your arguments to subsidiarity. If the local nobility has the capacity to raise arms, then if you're dependent upon them to raise arms, then they have that capacity, right?
Yes.
Yes, is that right?
But
I'm trying to make your argument for you.
Yeah, but you could also propose sovereignty out of benevolence of the central government, which is never going to be stable.
All right, so everybody knows my position. My position is rule of law, monarchy is above the law, and restoration of the law. We should have subsidiarity at the local level. My view would be we'd be better off with nobility than elected people. I think that cabinets are a better way of doing it than elections. However, I prefer that if you're going to raise money or enact any other law that has equal impact, it's pretty good to have the support of the responsible people. That would be my argument. And this just, everybody thinks I have some moral attitude. I don't. It's just epistemology. Like, who has the information necessary to make this decision, and has the incentives to make it for the collective interest. I mean, it's just basic epistemology. It's not about morality or belief or anything. It's just fucking knowledge.
My argument on monarchy is it's just above the law, or it's not, no ifs and buts. Because if you're saying only in restoration of the law, then you're proposing there's another sovereign that decides if the monarch is in his right to restore the law.
I was just talking about natural law. In other words, somebody's being harmed. They have the capacity to do it. That's all. I mean, it's actually in the UK Constitution. I mean, the unwritten Constitution. It's in there. The monarchy is above. The problem is they're too afraid right now to do anything about it.
Well, then it's meaningless, in effect.
I agree. That's why I agree. The monarchy should be the head of the army. For that reason. All right, what's next?
Okay, well, next question is a long one. Let me note the timestamp for question 6 from Suki. I just got done watching a woman crying due to what can be parsimoniously summarized as the following. The woman, Teal's mom, is crying due to the intense pain over the inner psychological split. Impossible societal expectation for a woman to choose between career excellence, success, and expressing their innate femininity. She feels like she can't do both. She feels trapped by a world that demands she must act like a man to compete and survive in the world, which she says will psychologically destroy her and her relationships over time, as well as cause her to deny an essential aspect of herself. She also states that she can never become a man and doesn't want to become one, not sure if it's mental, physical, or both, adding the friction to the situation. And that same society judging her as a failure if she prioritizes traditional gender roles and her feminine nature, which she feels like she also simultaneously wants to express alongside the career success. She says she really wants this, but it feels pathetic and weak, and she doesn't want to be strictly confined to the stereotypical housewife dynamics that feels tremendously guilty for setting women back if she acts on that desire. She feels eternally damned due to this. There's no safe ground, no syncretism possible, creating an unresolvable and exhausting damned if I do, damned if I don't paradox that leaves her feeling defeated and unable to be her authentic self. Ideally, I think she wants to live a life where it's possible to play a female adapted male life strategy, like being able to work and be justly recognized for her work, accrue real status according to her contributions, while not having to sacrifice or deny her femininity, and be able to have a family early on and take care of her children without friction between the two. What do you think could be done to bring that about, if possible?
Was me, Martin, or you? It's you,
No,
Martin. Go ahead.
okay, she's right, and also basically saying women cannot be expected to bring about or advocate the return to tradition in the world that treats tradition as low status, which is also true. I watched a bit of this one in the past, and while she's clearly a woman in how she models the world, I don't remember finding anything objectionable.
So the answer is actually here inside. I mean, this is, by the way, those the blue here. Those are my notes to myself. That's not what I would. That's all it is. So the men make the same choice. In other words, how much do I want to devote to my family, and how much do I want to devote to my career? The male has to bias it more toward the career, partly because that's his only option. Women have to bias it more towards the family, right? But that's because if she wants a family, that's her only option. So I don't think this is an irresolvable conflict. I think the conflict is actually that the seeking of, how do I say this? If you want to have everything, you can't. You have to make a choice. The status part, I think, is a problem for people in general. I think that's a feminism problem. In other words, that's part of feminism. The second part of the problem, which is not identified here, is the female demand for conformity. So women are easily forced into conformity with the feminist value system because women are more susceptible to demand for conformity. And so this is actually a self-defense mechanism. It's obvious. So you have not only feminism, but you have natural female conformity. The illusion here is that women didn't always do this. Women always did this. I don't know where to get the 1950s, the 1950s stay-at-home mom luxury, because that's what they considered it. They considered it a luxury of being able to stay home and take care of home and family, and they could actually have their own house, right? That was a pretty awesome thing. You could have your own house. You could have your own family. You could have your own husband, and you could have the time to devote to those things. That was a great thing. But that was like a short term. For most of history, women have the not only the household, but they have the household economy, which is they're always making money at something. It could be making cheese or making what's the other home good, or making breads or weaving. Specifically, weaving is most of it. All right. And you still see this in other parts of the world. I forget where I was not too long ago. You know, there's a shop, and the woman is off to the side, and she's weaving a carpet, right? Well, why? Well, she wants to be around her husband, and he wants her around, and they run the shop together. And the great thing about weaving or knitting or anything of that nature is that you can break to take care of a child, or break to take care of a customer, or break to take care of a husband, whatever. You can go in and out of it. Most men's jobs don't allow that, right? Because they create stressors for other men by doing that. So most women were always engaged in the economy. They were just engaged in the economy where they weren't distant from their children, and the child caring load could be distributed across their children and very often other family members. So I don't see this as a modernity problem so much as I see it as a taxation problem. In other words, all the money contributed to the economy by the introduction of women has been consumed by taxation, all of it. And so what we've done is we've used redistribution, and I'll say this honestly because I just wrote about this yesterday, is the national debt is less than the redistribution from Asians, whites, and a few Hindus to Africans and Hispanics.
Wait, say that again. The national debt, what is it, $45 trillion is less than the what?
No, every year, the increase in the debt
Oh, okay.
is due to a 500 is due to two factors. One is the corruption, which is 1.5 trillion, right? That's the blacks cost 500 billion, and Hispanics cost 350 billion. So that number together, 1.5 plus 9, right, is 2 point whatever trillion dollars. Well, our deficit every year is somewhere around 1.8, which is true, right? Unless we do something else, that's just an average number. So between the corruption through the largely through the Democratic Party, and through the subsidy transfer of wealth from whites, Asians, and small number of Hindustanis, right, Indians, those three groups are profitable. They are profitable. There is almost no cultural challenge provided by East Asians because they integrate well, and there is a rising retaliation against Hindustanis because they don't integrate well. And so this might be the rate of introgression as well as cultural, but that's what's happening. So basically, we are funding, we are taking from the competent people who provide surpluses, and we are financing the people who do not, who are sunk cost. Between them and the Democratic Party's use of corruption to fund the groups to buy their votes and buy their loyalty, between those two things, it's far more than the debt we produce every year. So essentially, between whites, East Asians, and Hindus, we are a for-profit enterprise, and our debt is not
even with us maintaining Pax Americana, and if we shrink the defense to just hemispheric defense, it'll cost a lot less. Make it into a space-based hemispheric defense.
Yes. So, but I want to make clear that that's only accounting for the monetary decline. It's not It's not accounting for the informal capital decline. In other words, we're only accounting the economics, right? When we say that, who's contributed and who's not, and who's a cost. Instead, what we're seeing is that the real cost is what we categorize as bowling alone, which is the degradation of the high trust society,
the social
willingness
capital
to contribute, and it's all the social capital that's being destroyed by the introgression of these people. Now, of course, the left is all up in arms about Trump, but if you look at the numbers, crime, we haven't had this low a reduction in crime since 1900 or something. I mean, it's incredible, right? So all the shit he's doing, we have the same thing with the decrease in the trade imbalance. We have the same thing with, the interest rates. We have the same thing with inflation. We have all these positive signs, yet the left is really retaliating because they're losing their ability to buy people. And this is terrifying because they can't maintain their sense of control. They can't buy people by redistributing from Europeans, East Asians, and Hindustanis to basically Hispanics and Africans and Middle Easterners. Right? It's not even. It's embarrassingly simple that this is going on. So, so how am I getting there? So the point is that I'm trying to tie this back to the female issue, is that if we weren't having these issues, right? If we weren't having these problems, we would not have the issue of having to have women work in the workplace so that they can add to the tax thing, so that they can be actually undermined, so their culture can be undermined, so their government can be seized by the left. It's fucking horrible. So blame your feminist friends and develop a whatever first generation feminism approach instead of a fourth generation feminine approach, and you'll be able to get out of it. But if you are not willing to fight that fight, and what you're really saying here in your argument is that you don't want to fight that fight, then you're going to be the prisoner of it, at least until men decide they're not going to put up with it anymore, simply because it's too hard on their wives and daughters. Anyway, that's my rant on this.
It's the merchant problem and liberalism problem. Feminism is just a symptom. Merchants obviously benefit financially from having women in the workforce, and liberalism cannot say that by
Yeah, but
virtue
Mark,
of
so,
trades.
you're not wrong, but it's like a selective reasoning. When the Industrial Revolution happens, what's been the basic problem through all of history? Consumption. So what do they sell the future by? They sell it by the opportunity for consumption. Yes, we've exhausted the opportunity for consumption to the point where the consumption is actually now harmful, right? We're decapitalizing. We're not improving consumption. We're decapitalizing. And so it was rational for people to do it at the time. It's just no longer rational to do that any longer. We need to return to capitalizing. And we can't.
It's always rational.
Huh?
It's always rational to defect in the prisoner's dilemma, but somebody should put a stop to it.
Yes. Agreed. All right.
If I can finish the liberalism objection, it cannot say that by virtue of traits one is born with, especially sex, one should have a specific role and not be equal to others. That means specific rights and privileges and incentives relating to that role.
Right. Yeah, we have the instinct to protect women, and this is actually working against us. It's like our high trust society. It works when we come to integrating outsiders, it works against us. So there's all these benefits of this mass hallucination that we call the high trust society, right? There's all these benefits to it, but those benefits are only internal. They have nothing to do with externals. All right, what's the next one?
Next question. Question 7. To what degree and in what manner should the internet be regulated to regulate antisocial and parasitic behavior, particularly in online dating, if it is to exist at all, social media and online communities? Also, should legal features also exist on these apps, like suing for defamation, and should there be international standards and ways to manage disputes between individuals from different nations? Relevant domains include online dating, online discourse and speech, content moderation, and determining what types of online activity should not be permitted. Jordan Peterson often discusses this, often related to online anonymity, which he says allows this, and the influence of individuals as dark triad traits: psychopathy, Machiavellianism, sadism, and narcissism, to use it for their dark objectives and express their dark traits. He also stated something approximating that nobody has figured out how to properly regulate the internet. I'm probably going to kick myself for saying this, except maybe the Chinese, but that's a little a little bit too much that way.
I'll say it's all right. If we actually return to self-determination at state level, then states would determine what their citizens have access to and what platforms they have access to would be subject to local, and platforms that they have access to would be subject to local rules. China already does this, and the EU is trying to, till motivated by evil ideology. Principle of subsidiarity would dictate even at local levels. Community could determine what its members could access or have their own local platforms. This seems dystopian, especially to us dissidents, and yes, there's much potential for abuse. But the potential to spread propaganda, surrogate activities, and even informational overload are just as much of an issue. And allowing local limits can let people decide what's healthy to do online and what isn't, and incentivize more real-life engagement. Our brains filter out useless sense perception information to keep one's attention at actionable opportunities, whereas information overload causes a psychedelic paralysis. Healthy informational ecology would do the same. Making the services local can also prevent the data being available to outside actors.
See if I think I want to answer what you said here first. Yeah, okay, I answered. Okay. So the short answer is treat the internet as an informational commons, not a feelings forum. Permit any speech that is truthful under warranty. Throttle or tax anonymous reach. Prohibit parasitism by restoring liability. Platforms become insurers and record keepers. Users choose identity liability tiers, right? So my point here is really simple, is that our effort is to limit these things to truth, right? And the way we seek to do it is by applying our work to our corporate side, which is Principle, which provides curation of social media, which explains what's going on. So that's number one. I would say that truth is enough if we provide it, and especially when we say we're going to identify lying and whatever. I mean, the current crap that's going on over Greenland and whatever, in Europe and America. I mean, there's so much bullshit out there. It's utterly amazing. It's just emotional venting. Well, I mean, there's no reason we can't tag this stuff with that, and and still have it go on. Or we can't tag stuff and say emotionally venting will be, stuff that's non-argumentative would have to be dismissed. The problem is then the pressure moves elsewhere. In other words, people will seek to do it by other means, right? And so my attitude is that it's better to just tag stuff as bullshit than it is to prohibit it. Now, that is referring to platforms and social media, right? That's my argument there. I don't disagree with Martin's argument, but I think it is easier for platforms to provide my argument and my answer, and so that can be done. One of the things we propose in our work is exactly that: is that local sovereignty prevails over this kind of thing. The problem is people can circumvent this stuff so easily that it's almost a waste of time. I mean, right now, if you just get a what is it called? Why am I blanking? An anonymizer. Francis, when you go through God damn it.
What?
When you make your account hidden.
When you make your what?
Your internet activity hidden through an anonymous server.
Like a VPN?
Yeah, VPN. Thank you. Jesus. So when you use a VPN, you get around this stuff. So I'm not sure you can locally control it unless you're like China. You want to put a huge structure together to do it, including the people who monitor it.
Yeah, it's very. Just case in point, China spends more on internal security than it spends on defense.
Yes, it's fucking crazy.
And
Well, I mean,
maybe
Russia's the same. Russia spends more on internal security than it does on defense. Well, not right now, maybe, but usually. So I think you have a couple of other things. So there's, I think, the question. Another question is the retaliation against it. We have, because we didn't know how to filter it. We have created this freedom of speech thing, as well as the defamation, right? The defamation stuff, right? And so the problem is our courts soften defamation in order to allow newspapers to be able to conduct public discourse, right? and partly because they don't want the courts can't get involved in everything. However, if I went through and I said this is defamatory, right, without evidence, the left couldn't talk, right? And the right's conspiracy theories might sound like they couldn't talk, but it turns out too many of them are true. So because what's the feminine left's means of gossiping, shaming, and rallying? It's defamation. They don't actually argue. They just use defamation. So if it was possible to sue people for defamation on on social media, that would be great, as long as it's actually defamation. In other words, as long as it's not true. Excuse me, not true? Yeah, it has to be false. It's not defamation if it's true. Um, so most of the left would be hindered by fixing that one issue, which of course in our proposition for the constitutional reforms we include that. The third one is the one that I consider baitings into hazard, and that is unfortunately the dating, the sex trafficking, uh, 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 call girl prostitution, dating app format. It turns out this has been really, I mean, I don't like prior constraint, but this fucking shit is suicidal. It's killing our civilization. And it's killing our civilization partly because females are hypergamous and magical thinking and have no capacity to judge their relative market value. So, and then what that does is that sets up the guys who are really good at taking advantage of that to do so, and it delays or prevents family formation and reproduction. But worse, it basically breaks the capacity of a woman to have a mating bond. And so what happens is this is the most destructive thing I've seen in my lifetime, and I was for it so much when I first saw it. I met Amanda online, right? I met Amanda online. Amanda's a rock star of a woman. Um, I met Amy online. Most everybody else I met in person. But you look at these people and you say, "Wow, this is absolutely positively socially destructive because it is a form of baiting into hazard." Um, and given that what we advance, in other words, our advance in other words, the argument we make is that the principal vehicle by which the West is being undermined is the feminine Abrahamic Marxist sequence of using baiting into hazard on one side and pilpul and critique on the other. It's undermining to undermine our culture. And they've been tremendously successful with it, and we can fix it by prohibiting it. So I'm actually in the camp of uh, my argument is it's really simple to fix these problems. The West did not include baiting into hazard as did every other civilization in their laws because it conflicts with individual sovereignty, which is the first principle of our civilization.
Which is a
So
lie.
we well,
And it's a lie.
it is a lie. However, that did not make it so that the baiting into hazard was obstructed. If baiting into hazard had been prohibited, we would have never had 110 or whatever it is expulsions, right? It would have never happened, and we wouldn't have had the Marxist sequence succeed so well in undermining our civilization. So fundamental there's weaknesses in our fundamental law, but precisely because it's not true, Martin. But it is still it is still a principle. The first principle of the common law is the same reason we say I argue against the claim that we don't have free will. We have free will in moral matters. We absolutely do. We exercise it, however, morally or not. Well, that's the fundamental problem. We can. And so we need to make sure that people who would take advantage of baiting in that hazard? Can't. If we did that, most claims of capitalism would also disappear. So I view this as I like that it was brought up. I see this is a really big deal.
Well, I analyzed capitalism and it's full of prisoners' dilemmas.
Yes.
Where basically people are incentivized to defect from what would be best for everyone to improve their own lot.
But again, you don't start from the position of it made sense at the time to get people incentivized, but it was like most things people do, a directional improvement without the proper limits. Well, you're the one that is working on. I mean, your works on this over the past couple of weeks is fucking astounding. In that we have to establish limits. What you're effectively doing is articulating those limits. But I think if you attribute it, because I know you do this, you attribute it to malice. Or whatever. You're just trying to demonize something that doesn't need to be demonized. It merely needs to be understood. Understanding it is we created a bunch of incentive for a really good reason, and unfortunately, the consequence was that we did not produce the limits because we did not anticipate the limits. And now we know those limits and we must enact these limits. This is the story of the evolution of the common law, right? The common empirical natural law. The natural common empirical law is just we're going through the normal process of it. I think the real argument is that it took us this long to figure it out, and that our legislature and our courts are so broken because we took it so long to figure it out that we can't actually enact the corrections. Anyway, I'm trying to get you not to demonize, just to explain. But anyway, okay.
Well, I also don't want to deny that there were real people that profited from the corruption.
Yeah, there are always real people that profit from the corruption. Absolutely. You're never going to have people who don't profit from corruption. Every advancement in knowledge and opportunity produces an equal advancement and opportunity for corruption and crime. Just what it is. Evolutionary necessity. I can't, Mark. I'm just going to go read Martin's 2-sentence answer down here and see if that helps me understand the question.
Or you move on to question 8.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, hold on. Let me do this. I'm going to read it. Question 8 from Suki. I must first preface this by saying I'm not a racist and I'm against a class of behaviors. This is a large problem that shouldn't go without full resolution. Of course, anyone in the U.S. with an eye knows that this most certainly doesn't describe all of them. Finally, I do not understand the role of leftists in this issue, especially the family part of relevant groups, due to watching your video with Brad. How does the NLI plan to totally extirpate? Extirpate. Okay, I learned a new word. The ghetto, parasitic, antisocial, low classes, and
You could have used defecate.
Okay.
Never mind.
And uncivil dress behavior, familial manners, verbal, cognitive, and cultural behaviors and norms usually seen in the United States in public K-12 schools and in public society. Usually, but not limited to, African Americans and young Latino Americans. Is this something that can actually be fully fixed via law or culture, or would it also require reproduction control to reduce their numbers such that only the civil and functional ones are fertile, as I suspected? If it does require reproduction control, could you explain how the NLI will go about doing it, or outline the plans that already address these concerns? Directly or indirectly, and if you are going to use reproduction control, could you tell us the selection mechanism for those who qualifies for reproduction control and what to look out for to prevent the births of fuck-ups in advance? And these people's existence are really a drag on everyone else, including the middle and upper class blacks and the Latinos, and the removal will tremendously boost the American social fabric and quality of life. before you guys dive into, I'm just gonna say, well, I for one, I guess, consider myself a racist, right? A racist or a race realist, and I think
Basically,
the answer there is really knowing that this is the reality. What perverse incentives can we stop doing to discourage the dysgenics and bring back eugenics? Such as, I'll give you an example: stop Section 8 housing,
absolutely.
right? Why should we take from the middle class, the middle class, to give some hooker who has 8 different children with like 5 different dads, subsistence in rent?
Yeah, Brey and child support is and alimony as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'd kill it because you kill the incentive structure. Yeah, well, Martin, give your answer because it's right.
Yeah, this is one of those fix everything button issues. And criminals lock up or deport everyone incompatible with the nation's group strategy, everything gets better.
Yeah, the correct answer is they're trying to keep everyone in society rather than remove the traditional European method, which is remove the maximum number of people from society that you can. And that's the via negativa model. The via positivo model is we can make them all good. You fucking can't. I'm sorry.
No, the Chinese realize you can't do that. Usually, it's
You
just
can't.
speedy execution.
Yes. You want to go out, dummy? No, Martin, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to John.
Called your dog a dummy. Does he have a name?
Ayo.
I have no idea what that means. That's an atypical dog name.
They're Spanish. He's
Okay.
Spanish and she's Slavic. And he makes I don't know if he knows that because I love this guy, right? I love Alex. He's Spanish. They moved to Mexico and then to California. He moved to California and now they're up here. Anyway, she's a rock star. She's a rocket scientist, really. She's wonderful. And he's a great person. But he does a really good Michael Myers impression,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure he knows he's doing it. So I have to mess with him about that next segment. That's my next.
You mean she's a literal rocket scientist as she works for one of Elon Musk's companies?
No, she's just, but she's worked for McKinsey, right?
Okay.
Right. They're both the MBA people, right? And so he's in tech, and so he does tech consulting, and she's mucky muck at Google like you. Right? I was trying to get something out of you with that. I mean, nothing. I got nothing.
I didn't know what that means.
Mucky muck
What's a mucky muck?
means it's an important person.
Okay. I don't consider myself a very important person.
Well, I was supposed to get you to smile about that, but obviously, if the idiom isn't making sense,
You gotta understand, I didn't grow up here.
I know you didn't grow up here, but you're more American than most people.
Yeah, but it means I don't have a lot of the like ideograms down.
Idioms. Well, I don't
Idioms.
have the popular shit either. I have the same issue. I have like you brought up neat earlier, and I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Oh yeah, okay. Well, that's the thing I should know. But if it's anything pop culture, I'm fucking oblivious. All right, so this was really good. It's a fix everything problem. Okay. Okay. So fundamentally, if we hadn't had the Nazis in World War II, eugenics would still exist. And so there's hard eugenics and soft eugenics. And then there's incentives, and then there's laws and regulations. So I'm going to try to keep my train of thought this time. We have created malincentives. We have created malincentives, as Francis has just illustrated. What we should do is remove those malincentives, so that it is a real cost to do this. The second thing we should do is so that's the malincentives. The second thing, so that would include subsidy and including subsidy by child support, alimony, and blame for interference in a marriage. We should restore blame for interference in a marriage. We should also restore sterilization for a child out of wedlock, right? Or out of incapacity to actually pay for it.
Or wait,
That
sterilization before or after the fact? Because it makes a difference.
if you have one and you right, then that's going to that right there will fix the problem.
Yeah, but I would
Right?
go
That's
like, abortion or something.
well, that's what's going to happen, right? By putting the sterilization, right, you will get abortions. But how do I determine you need an abortion,
Oh,
right?
I see.
Uh, you know, so anyway, the next thing is uh, if your IQ is below a certain level, that's the one that gets scary to people. Pretty much half of the black population is below 85, right? Half of the world's population is below 85. Well, you have to be like 92 or 93 to do anything, right? So we need to pick some number. The problem is if we pick like 92 or 93, then you're like, okay, we get rid of a lot of people at that point.
Well, the answer is don't feed the animals.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Oh, God.
the problem
Don't we
is,
sound like a bunch of
Martin,
Nazis right now?
yeah, I know. I mean, he asked the fucking question. I'm giving the answer, right? I'm not advocating anything. I'm simply enumerating the things you can do to fix this, right? Right. I'm not advocating this. I'm just telling you what you'd have to do.
Sure, you're not advocating this.
I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying. He asked me a question. I know the answer. Our job is to tell the truth. That's because other people won't. That's our job, right? Is to tell the truth that every people want, and then to ask people to make rational decisions that are within their moral capacity. That's all we're doing, right? We're not sitting here saying you need to go do this. At least I'm not. Maybe Martin is. I'm not sure. You see, Martin.
Yeah,
You have to smile bigger. You have to smile bigger because they don't know what your reaction is.
I remind you that don't feed the animals is via negativa.
My purpose is to just enumerate what you could do. The other thing is to sterilize at 85 or 90 or something like that. Just do it. That eliminates the problem. That eliminates the problem in a couple of decades. I mean, you are there, right? That eliminates it in a couple of decades. The next problem is what we think of as incarceration. We are not keeping people out of the world, and we're not fucking hanging off of them. Europe did a great job. Asia did a great job. Europe did a great job of hanging the hell out of people until they had what we call it's a genetic domestication. We call.
Like
I can't remember the word.
Over domesticated.
No, it's what's his name? Anyway, it's genetic domestication, and so if we have a lot of people, a lot of them that cannot be fixed, and most of the crime is in that 1% of people that are let out repeatedly. If we hung those people, or we said you're just not ever going to be trustworthy, you put them into camps in the desert, for example, which would be wonderful. I'm a favor of hanging, really, because you create the incentive. If we did that, then we would be within 3 generations, things would be radically different. Within 1 generation, things would be radically improved. And the answer is, are you willing to do that? Let me rephrase it in order to make Martin happy. It's very difficult to do that in the Democratic polity. Not in a Democratic polity, only the responsible people vote, but a Democratic polity where women and irresponsible people vote. It's very difficult to do what I just said, and it's actually the responsible thing to do.
A lot of people would be all for it, but it doesn't happen because democracy doesn't matter. Oligarchs do what they want. people, whenever
I'm gonna,
they got the opportunity, they voted for more order.
we have a very big problem of underclass present, uh, underclass presence in the House of Representatives. England has a worse problem. If I look at the data, it looks like it's women that are the problem. So again, I'll say put in who's responsible, which is going to be largely white and Asian males over 35, and you're probably going to, who are who are self-sustaining taxpayers. Then you're going to find out that you're going to get pretty good votes out of those guys. Because they're in the reason they have responsibility is because they know how to bear responsibility. And so if you just limit it to responsibility there, well,
Already, if you're proposing multiracial democracy, you're asking for trouble.
well, again, I am a classist, not a racist. I'm a race realist, but I am not troubled by minorities, so to speak, as much as I'm troubled by the underclasses of minorities, because they have a different IQ distribution, and that's the underlying problem. So because I mean,
just it, each has their own genetic incentives. That
yeah, I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying a different thing, Martin. You're right because you're in a small Eastern European country. I'm in the naval tradition, so I view the world differently from you because I'm advocating for that worldview, just as you're advocating for that worldview. It's not that either of us is. It means both of us are right in the context of which we're arguing for. I'm saying you can't universalize what you're saying, and you're saying I can't universalize what I'm saying. It is simply a fact that we benefit from pulling in people, the upper class, the upper intellectual cadres from other cultures. We just do. And especially if
not in the long run, because then they replace your people and rule you.
Oh, they don't though. They don't. That's the thing.
They do. That's what happened with Jews. That's what's happening with Indians.
But Jews are outbreeding. They're not going to be any devoted Jews in 3 generations in America. They're outbreeding like crazy. They know it. They're aware of it. They complain about it. The question is, if you have too many of those at once, it's a problem. But if you don't have too many at once, right? They aren't a substantial number of the population.
Are you sure they're not? Are you sure they're not just trying to like hedge their bets to ensure?
No, it's a real. Look it up. It's a real problem. They're always fucking pissed about it. They still have the disproportionate influence because they specialize in baitings into hazard. But we could prevent that in a heartbeat. We could prevent the Jewish method of obtaining wealth by baiting into hazard easily, or alliance with the state easily. Those are easy things to pass. But again, for the reason I explained earlier, we have been too taught. We in our culture, a high trust culture, we have not suppressed baiting into hazard. Well, okay, well, fine. We're going to suppress it, baiting into hazard, and we're going to prohibit alliance with the state against the people. Both of those things are easy laws to put into practice and enforce, and that would change some behavior. On the other hand, yeah, the Jews have been incredibly destructive to the West, and Muslims are looking to be worse than Jews in being destructive to the West, which is why they're going to pass that law in Texas, I think, this year that prohibits everything to do with Islam. It's going to prohibit Sharia law and a bunch of that. And Texas is going to lead the role in this. So I would say that one of the reasons I like keeping Martin involved in this is because he is always compensating for my Anglo optimism. But I have Anglo naval optimism, and he has Eastern European territorial pessimism. These are good things to have before people, partly because they don't make us look like ideologists. I don't want to come across as ideological. we're supposed to be developing a standard of measurement by which everything can be measured so that people can develop the systems of government that they need for their people so that we can have 1,000 nations bloom and people can have the commons that they need for their own people and they can trade for the technical and economic things that they need to obtain from others. That's the optimum. That's the thing that is decidable. In other words, it's not a matter of preference. That's a decidable means that is indifferent to group differences. Every other group difference that violates that is an attempt to gain by parasitism from another group and creating conflict. Okay, great. So my suggestion is what we are doing is creating decidability, right? That does not mean that that's what you must do. It just means that's how you would decide and how you would measure and how you would communicate your differences. Otherwise, whatever government you have is a Chinese menu, right, so to speak. You just choose whatever you want from whatever we suggest, and you build what is necessary for you. It doesn't mean that if I'm trying to produce decidability, that is me saying you need to do this, because truthfully, it may only be that Germanic Europeans can do it. It may be possible they don't, and Japanese because they already do it. It may be true, but that's the value of what we do as a science rather than a philosophy or ideology. Okay, where the fuck are we?
Well, I guess we are actually 15 minutes over. Should we just call it here?
Okay, well,
That's 8 questions.
we did 8 questions.
Yeah.
Those were good questions. Suki, does this are you like an AI somewhere that just invents really good questions?
It's it.
Benjamin Duffman Dash. This guy's fucking amazing. Do we know who he is in real life?
No.
No.
Yeah. Well, Suki, if you're listening to this, drop a line in the forum or something. Tell us who you are
Yeah.
to the extent you're able.
No, you're pretty valuable.
Who
All right.
knows if he's still watching after we are answering it months later when he asked.
Have you got any new stuff from him?
Let's see.
And his questions are coming to an end.
Oh, well, no. The latest that he dropped was December 26th. So
Okay,
they're
so
still coming, just not in the same volume as it used to be.
Okay.
Dude, you gotta let us know who you are so we can
Tease
loop
you.
you in. All right. This is Francis Martin and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. This has been Friday, January 23rd, 2026. It is our twice every other week. We have a Friday morning. We have office hours in the link in the comments below. Francis usually puts a link to the forum where you can enter your questions. Please just do that. Put them up there. We love them. We do keep a backlog, so we get to them in the order we actually get to them. But we would rather have a backlog of questions than not enough to answer. All right, Francis, anything else I got to do here? Anything else? Martin, anything else?
Nope. That is
Nope.
all.
Nope. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.